that pretty lady. Get comfy.
You sure you don't want a coffee?
Oh, I got that.
Or next time then. What's your blankets though?
Alright. So yeah, it's standard to just run through. Hopefully, I think we're fine.
I think we're okay.
I can kind of see the reflection in the window there.
Yeah.
Alright, so hello.
Hi.
Okay. So we're just gonna go through the part 3 really fast because that's standard. I'm gonna be a good personal trainer and not get sued. Has your doctor ever said that you have a heart condition or high blood pressure?
No.
Alrighty, so then that's just us going through the standard Part Q form. Luckily, nothing came up until the very end.
In the past 12 months, a bone and soft tissue problem that could be made worse by becoming more physically active.
Yes.
Like many, yeah. We're gonna go
My
through
ankle,
all-
yeah.
yeah.
So then we just kind of got settled in, and I exemplified my excellent interview skills.
I love my mechanical pencils, but the lead in them is so unreliable sometimes.
And we continue.
So then the right ankle, so issues that can affect that is like if you're lunging or you're squatting or step ups. Step ups might be.
Step ups are okay if I do them slow. It's more like jump squats or like
Okay, so no
you know,
high impact.
yeah, just no. Yeah.
Yeah, so then we just continue to discuss her lovely injuries. So she's got a chronic injury with her ankle. She just perpetually rolls it all the time, and it's been weakened from, not like improper rehab or no rehab, basically. And then we talked about an acute injury that recently occurred. She tweaked her hip when she was grooving out dancing the other night. So then we just kind of discussed a couple specific exercises that we might want to save for later, or we could put in, and like how we would modify them. And then we talked about what space she has available and what sort of exercises she could realistically perform in that space. And then from there we talked about encouraging and deterring factors in regards to working out.
And so yeah, when you don't see progress straight away, you get discouraged.
I do. Yeah. Because I find, especially the last year, every single time I start like a workout program, like I'll give it a couple weeks, but then I notice that I gain 5 pounds or I gain 6 pounds, and I think it's just
some muscle, dude.
I think it's muscle, yeah, and it's like muscle or like inflammation, I guess, and so I mean that's discouraging because my husband, he will work out with me, and like he'll do the same thing and he loses. Like I remember one time he lost 12 pounds and I gained 4 pounds, and I'm like.
That's men though. It's because as you're there's like that physique change.
Yeah.
So as men, like or just people in general, as you're gaining muscle, your body is using a lot more calories to feed that muscle.
Yeah.
And then and all those calories are going to be coming from your fat stores. So it's not like, and then when you stop working out, that process kind of reverses itself. So it's not like fat tissue becomes muscle tissue, and it's not that muscle tissue becomes fat tissue.
Okay.
It's that like you're creating muscles, and the fat is feeding the muscle,
Okay.
right? So the fat slowly diminishes. So yeah, and in men, just hormonally, they've evolved and they kind of have needed muscle more than we have. So that's why that happens.
Then we wrapped everything up by talking about Grace's schedule, how many times a week she wants to work out ideally, and when is going to be the best time of day for her to find some time to exercise. And she's thinking after she drops her kids off at school, and a little bit on how she will handle her mindset if she's feeling really tired that day. And then we moved up to my lawn to do some exercises and check out her form.
Pretty girls in frame. Alrighty, show me your best squat.
My best squat?
Yeah, let's see your squat. Just a regular, like if somebody was just, no, that's good. That's really good. Okay, and then turn to the side and squat. Okay, awesome. 1 second.
So I just slowed this down so you can see Grace's hips and knees are bending at the same time. As she's popping up from the squat, she does kind of launch herself forward a little bit, and we have some thoracic rounding, so shoulders rolling forward, but nothing too majorly out of the ordinary. She's keeping weight centered in the middle of the foot, which is great. There's a bit of an issue with knee hyperextension. I generally see this with when the hip flexors and quads are quite a bit tighter and the glutes are a bit weaker. And then also from the front, you have some knee valgus issues, which means the abductors, so the muscles in the sides of your legs and your glutes that bring the limb away from the middle of your body. Those are a little bit weaker, but it's all really normal stuff. We'll have her whipped into shape in no time.
Sorry, yes. Do you mind going over there? Just so I can make sure that it's like, yeah, if you're that far over, and then put your back against the wall, back against the fence. Sweet. All right, it's golden. So,
Alrighty, so I am showing Grace here how to do a wall test. I've used this with clients many times and with kind of different variations, but basically the goal is to get your heels, your entire spinal column, your wrists, and your head and your neck, everything like pressed flat up against the wall. In the beginning, we start with our feet a little bit further out to kind of give tight hip flexors and tight low back a little bit of leeway. We're going to soften the knees, keep weight, grounded in the middle of the foot, and then you're going to bring your elbows up so they're in line with your shoulders, and then slowly rotate your arms back, and eventually try and get your wrists flat up against the wall. So this is just going to demonstrate all the areas of tightness basically in your entire body. And then eventually you'll be able to press up overhead, keeping your wrists stacked over your elbows, kind of like you would for a shoulder press. And we pick up on like all of these areas of tightness from our repeated like movement patterns. So like typing on a laptop, on your phone. This is just a really excellent exercise to kind of bring you back to a place of neutrality and be like, oh, my right trap is tight, or that wrist, I really can't get it flat up against the wall, and just kind of, like I said, come back to a place of neutrality, and also connect to your breath, connect to your core, and use that intra-abdominal strength to flatten your spine as best as you can up against the wall. My OCD brain is not letting me let this go. So there's one more thing I want to add. With the flattening of the spine, your low back does have a natural arch to it, like a neutral spine has that. Anyway, so when you're flattening your low back, it's not necessarily completely flat. There's generally a very small gap between your lumbar and the wall. Just heads up. If you have anterior pelvic tilt or posterior pelvic tilt, how big that gap is going to completely vary. So anyway, just keep that in mind. Alrighty, so next up we have kettlebell deadlift. So basically you want to be, something I used to say to people is like, show the world your butthole, which I know sounds like crude and horrible, but it really works. You can also think tailbone to the sky. So you hinge at the hips, basically press your hips back, going into a little bit of lumbar extension there, and feeling good stretch in your hamstrings, and then consciously contracting your glutes and hamstrings as you stand up. I always like to imagine the floor is like a leg press, and if individuals have issues with knee valgus or knees knocking in, it's good to think about kind of tearing the floor apart with your feet as you stand up. With Grace, I found as soon as she focused on keeping the kettlebell nice and close to her body, that means she's going to be contracting the abductors of her shoulders, so she's going to be contracting her lats, and that's going to assist the thoracic extension that we want, so open chest posture. So inhaling all the way down, contracting the glutes, and exhaling up.
Alright, 1 second. I'm just gonna lower the camera a little bit, make sure. That's so funny. This is why I wanted to work with you, is because you're like, fuck it, fine. Whatever. It's great. Okay, cool.
So basically in this chunk of the video, I'm just taking a look at how Grace's body reacts when I try to put her into a plank position. So we start off on her hands and knees, hips are stacked over the knees, and wrists are stacked right underneath the shoulders. And a lot of common mistakes you'll see with people is when they set up for a plank, they end up with their wrists like above their shoulders. If that makes sense. So you want to, and then your traps end up stabilizing instead of your core. So I was looking at that with Grace to make sure her body was going to be able to handle that, and we're just looking at some shoulder mobility stuff. And then when we get up into a full plank and she's up on her toes, you'll see I'm putting my hand on her low back and I'm telling her to exhale and breathe into her lumbar, which means I want her to almost tuck her hips and bring her belly button to her spine. That's like the best way I can describe how to contract your pelvic floor when you're first like learning how to do it, and those muscles haven't been worked in a while. I find that's a really helpful cue. And yeah, she's got a good athletic base going, so that wasn't too hard for her at all. Yay, Grace! Alrighty, so this next little bit here, we were looking at glute bridges and just the basic form there. I know that Grace has some issues with knee valgus, so knees knocking in, particularly on her right side. So I was just really starting off with like the basic form, and you can see even at like as her hips drop, her knees will come together. That's like a perfect example of knee valgus right there. So the goal with squats and deadlifts and glute bridges, all these hip abductor movements, you want to make sure, you know, the abductors in your glutes and your legs are being worked. And so one of the best cues and best ways to start that is to mentally think, okay, I'm tearing the floor apart, or you press your knees out slightly. So we worked on that. And there's many different forms you can do with the glute bridge, but we're just starting off with the standard one, feet placed about shoulder width or slightly further apart, and then pushing the floor away like a leg press. Exhale up, inhale down.
How are you feeling?
Oh, I feel
Thank you, slave.
Slave.